Welcome to Faith Talks Wood Podcast. I'm Will from Flat Woodworks.
And I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.
And we're a podcast about everything from Jesus to joinery, and we enjoy talking about every bit of that. So, Tom, as all the listeners know, I have Willie's Wood Finishes, and Willie's Wood Honey is my main product. And I am looking towards expanding because I've had several people ask if I thought about doing like a paste wax. After Johnson & Johnson stopped making their shop wax, I think there's been somewhat of a void in the market, and a lot of people are asking. And so I started messing with it 2 nights ago, just trying to get a ratio right of waxes and stuff. And the first batch I made, man, that wax was as hard as this desk I made. It was like you could barely use the white Scotch-Brite and get any onto the Scotch-Brite to put on what, whatever you're going to put it on. And I did manage to work some of it out, and I had a piece of walnut that I had put my finish on, and I buffed it into the walnut, and it put a high gloss finish on it. I had way too much carnauba wax, which is like the super hard wax that you can buff. That's what carnauba wax is, what is used in car finishes a lot. And so I did a second run last night to where I made it a little bit softer. And I'm still not in love with it. And so, let me ask you this. If you're going to buy a paste wax, would you prefer it be more geared towards your tools and putting it on your cast iron surfaces, or more towards like wood and like having it as a top coat after you do something like a Willie's Wood Honey? Which would you prefer?
I use them for both, so that is a hard choice. I use paste wax on all of my tool surfaces. One for protection, obviously,
right,
but the other for gliding.
Right.
Like and you could tell a difference when you have your tools cleaned and waxed versus when you don't. But with that being said, I also use it, on other surfaces. So, man, that's a hard choice. And I'll be honest, I've just always used the same one on both. And
right. Well, and so fine. The reason I'm asking is what I'm finding is to get the right ratio of waxes to make it, like a paste wax. So far, it's been a super hard wax. And I guess when you think, I do have a min wax version of the Johnson. I don't remember what it's called. And it's got chemicals and crap in it. And mine will be all natural, obviously. But it's just like it takes a lot of elbow grease to put it on and to get it out of the container and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking about trying to take a little bit different approach to make it'll still be like a harder paste wax, but make it a little more malleable that you can use it on tools, but then also, you could use it as a top coat on finishes. And so I'm just trying to find that balance of, which is which. So, I've had a good response to Willie's Wood Honey. And so, just looking in the next couple months to be releasing, Willie's shop wax or Willie's, wax or something like that. So yeah, that's what I've been kind of working on. I was thinking about it because when people I talked to at WorkbenchCon, I'd say 2 or 3 people said like, do you have a wax, like a paste wax? And I said, no, this is just a, kind of a universal finish. You could use it for that if you want, but it's really not designed for putting on tools and stuff. And so yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on. And my wife, funny enough, so my wife does stained glass. She used it on the glass and on the solder to buff the solder after she's all finished. And it works good on the solder and the glass, but it's not quite as good as the polishing compound that she uses, which is expensive and you have to let it sit and set up for a long time, and it's a chemical and stuff. And so I was trying to balance that too, to say, well, you could also use this on glass, and then she could market it to her glass people, but I don't know if that's going to be a thing or not. So yeah, just been kind of digging into that now. I've got lots of jars of Willie's Wood Honey and I'm ready to kind of start poking into the next thing. So how about you? How's it been? I know you've been working out on the farm, pruning. It looks like you've had the weather we've had here, man. It's been like anywhere between 55 and 70 degrees the last few days, and just blue skies and beautiful.
Yeah, it's been in the high 40s, 50s here. It's supposed to get up to almost 60 this weekend. And the sad thing about that, this is first week of March, and we've already got grass starting to grow and weeds starting to grow. And I'm like, no, I need another month, man. I just, I'm not ready for it all. Because
I hear that, man.
that's the only thing is like the winter is kind of a break from all the outside chores. And, I really would mind another month or 6 weeks of winter to give me a little more break. But yeah, it's coming. So I've been out
So
pruning my fruit trees. I wanted to get them done before we left for WorkbenchCon, and I just couldn't get it done. I had too much going on. So I'm honestly like everybody else. All the orchards around here were pruning before we left, and there's still a few of them out there pruning, but most of them are done. So I'm technically probably a week or two behind, but it's what it is. Get it done.
yeah. So quick thought, just random. So our house, we bought our property. The wood line on the one side of the house is junk. Like the guy hoarded. There's everything from barrels. They're all crappy plastic barrels, metal barrels, tires, just some scrap metal, just a lot of junk, truck bed, caps, all kinds of stuff. And so, we thought about trying to scrap stuff out, but I don't think there's enough to really make any money. And by the time I made the trips to the scrapyard, it would be almost not worth my time of, how much stuff there is. And so we're thinking about just renting a big 40-yard roll off and just filling her up.
You know what I would do? First, that there are people that make their living by coming by your house, picking up scrap metal, and they take it off and they get their income from recycling. I would look on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist first, because if you said, hey, you can have it, you come get it all, let them do the work, let them have all the time and expense in it, and you don't get anything out of it except for the fact you don't have to mess with it.
Right.
Yeah, and that time is money. So
absolutely,
I would venture to say
good idea.
You would probably find somebody. There's people around here advertising. Back in North Carolina, it was the same thing, but they'll come by, they'll have one of those big dumpster trailers, and they'll come by there, load it all up, and then they'll take it to the recycle bin or recycling center, and they'll get their money for it, and that's how they get paid. So
interesting. Well, it needs to be done before the foliage hits, because when that happens, it's all, and poison ivy and crap. And so I may do that this week or maybe tomorrow, even tonight after the podcast. I'll look on Marketplace to see if there's anybody out there that is local. I'm sure there are. It's just one of those things. I'm a big proponent of like my time versus the value of not doing it, in a sense. And
Exactly.
so, I could, and honestly, it was going to be, it's roughly $600 to $800 to get a big roll off, but that's a one-time fee. And then I'll take a day or two off of work, use the tractor and the grapple, and I'll fill that thing up. And then I'm done with it. I don't have to worry about it. But to where if I had to load the trailer up, and so that your idea of like getting somebody to come in, and then if they get all the scrap stuff, then I have to get a smaller roll off, and I don't have to fill, I could spend $200, $300 on a roll off instead of, so that's a good idea. So, I like it. So before we get rolling, there's a couple things. One, we have a new patron supporter. Now, historically, we would shout out the patron supporter, and really what I normally try to do is I'll reach out to them and just say, hey, thank you so much for supporting us. Do you care if we do a shout out? and most people don't care. And he said that he didn't, but he preferred not, because he sees this as a way to give back to what we're doing here. And so, you know who you are. I just want to say thank you so much for supporting us. It really means a lot to Tom and I to see that what we're doing is worth your money, in a sense. I don't mean that in a I want your money, but like that you feel there's enough value here that you want to get behind it. So thank you so much for that. And rolling off of that, if you want to become a patron supporter, super easy to do. Patreon.com/Faith Talks Wood. There's several levels out there, and all of the patrons get the podcast a few days early. So we post that out there, and soon you'll be getting some merch and a sticker and stuff like that once we kind of get things figured out there. Second way to support us, Apple Podcasts. Get on there, give us a 5-star review. It goes a long way. But only give us a 5-star review if you think it's worth a 5-star review. And then last way, just pray for us. We love this podcast. We love what God is allowing us to do through it. And honestly, and we're going to talk about it later on, but Tom and I met a lot of people at WorkbenchCon, and we got a lot of people that are excited to come on and share their testimony. That's what we want to do in this podcast. We want to lift up the name of God, name of Jesus, and how he's worked through us, and doing that through testimonies. And so we're really excited for what's to come in the future. I bet you we've got the next almost year worth of bookings coming up. So thank you guys so much. Really, really appreciate everybody out there. But with that said, Tom's got the word for today. I'm really excited about this. There's so many applications. So Tom, I'm gonna let you take it from here, man.
All right. So, as you stated earlier, I have been pruning a lot of fruit trees, and it's that time of year. And, when I'm out there working, I'm sometimes listening to a podcast, sometimes music, sometimes I just use the time to think and pray and talk to God. And, through the process of pruning trees, the Holy Spirit just kind of laid on me a message and put it on my heart to talk about pruning. So we're going to dive into John chapter 15, verse 1 through 8. And I'm going to read it from the NLT version today. I am the true grapevine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit. He prunes the branches that do bear fruit, so they will produce even more. You have already been pruned and purified by the message I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are gathered into a pile and burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want, and it will be granted. When you produce much fruit, you are my true disciples. This brings great glory to my Father. And short passage, but man, is it packed full of some great tidbits to learn from. So we're going to kind of unpack this a few verses here. The first being verse 2. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit. And so my question for you today is, what in your lives is not producing fruit? What might need to be totally cut out? Maybe it's too much TV time. Maybe it's some social media. Maybe it's extracurricular activities. It might be some relationships in your life that are not producing fruit. Believe it or not, sometimes volunteer opportunities, while we may feel good inside by doing them, they're not producing fruit. And that could even be excess activities at our church, volunteering too much there. Sometimes we try to be all things to all people, and by spreading ourselves too thin, we're not able to actually produce fruit in every area. Maybe it's financial obligations, maybe a Netflix or Hulu subscription, or eating out, or hobbies, or in my case, my old Harley Davidson. But whatever it might be, I urge you to sit down and take a look at your life, look at your calendar, look at your wallet, your checkbook, look at your relationships, and figure out what is producing fruit and what is not producing fruit. And it might mean trimming out some things that are just not productive in your life. The second part there, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so that they'll produce even more. And that part, we have things in our lives that are good, that are producing fruit, but like, for example, what I mentioned about church activities. Sometimes we can volunteer for everything that comes available, and then we're there, but we're not there, if that makes sense. Sometimes you can be unproductive by being present just because you've spread yourself so thin. Same thing, like, man, if you got kids and going to kids' sports, sometimes it can wear you out going here and there and everywhere. And so we really have to sit down and look at our calendars, look at our finances, and figure out if something is good and it's producing fruit, do we need to trim it back? Because what happens with a fruit tree, when you trim out the garbage that doesn't need to be there, and then you go and prune back the good branches, what will happen is a tree will go from producing 1,000 fruit that are teeny tiny. They're edible, but they're not that sweet, luscious fruit that's big and juicy, full of nutrients, as when you prune a tree properly, and you might get 100 fruit. And so what I want in my life, and I think we want in our lives, is for everything to be the best that it can be. And sometimes that means trimming out some stuff, maybe turning back a little bit. But on down in verse 4, man, it's such a powerful part here. Remain in me. That is the key. And so when we remain in him, that allows us to produce fruit. And on down where it says, apart from him, we can produce nothing. And so if the branch is severed from the tree, or in our case, if we are severed from Jesus, if we're not connected with him in his word, constantly talking to him in prayer, man, nothing we do is going to be fruitful. It doesn't matter what the intentions are. If I volunteer at my church for an activity, but I'm not spending time in God's word and spending time with God, it's not going to be a fruitful activity. If I go and volunteer at the soup kitchen or the homeless shelter or any other thing in my life, if I am not connected with God, those things are not going to be fruitful. And so I think that is the most powerful part of this whole entire pack is to stay connected with him, stay in his word. On down in verse 5, it says that if we remain in him, we will produce fruit. So if we're doing our part to stay connected to God, it's a guaranteed that we're going to produce fruit where he wants us to produce it. And in verse 8, I just love this, where it says, when you produce much fruit, you are my disciples, and this brings great glory to the Father. So when we take the time to spend time with God and his word, spend time in prayer, and be intentional about removing the unnecessary things in our lives, and then pruning back and trimming the things that are fruitful, but maybe in a little excess, man, it glorifies our Father in heaven. And that is just exciting to me. And I'm going to use an example. So I have been a member of a men's group at my church on Tuesday mornings for quite some time. And then I felt led to start another men's group, and my pastor had said we'd need another group later in the week on a different day. And so we started one early in the morning on Thursday mornings. But between going to church on Sunday, going to Bible study on Tuesday or Wednesday nights when they have those, going to men's group on Tuesday morning, men's group on Thursday morning, and then trying to run my farm, run my business, do everything else, I was feeling very, very drained. And I prayed about it, and God said, for a time, you need to step back from the Tuesday morning group. The group, because I was getting exhausted trying to do too many things all at one time. And so while that group is fantastic, I got some great friends in there, and it's just I was doing too much, trying to be too much to too many people, and my intentions were good because I was wanting to go there and be fed, be around my brothers. But the reality is, I have a wife, I have a daughter, I have a business, I have a farm, and then also other men's groups, my small group Bible study. And so I just had a whole bunch of teeny tiny fruit out there. And by pruning back a little bit, a few other things as well, now I'm seeing that the other things are being much more fruitful. And so I just really want to encourage you to sit down and analyze if you're feeling exhausted, if you're feeling drained, if you feel like maybe there's some things in your life that don't seem fruitful. First, pray about it and seek God's word about it. What does it say about it? And then it may be that God says for a time to take a step back from something. I had another friend of mine that was running the Meals on Wheels program in his city. And he just, after prayer, he's been doing it for quite some time, decided that God wanted him to step back from that and focus more on some other things so that those things could be more fruitful because he was just exhausted trying to run everything. So, what are your thoughts on this, Will?
Man, you don't know how relevant this is. Literally tonight, I kid you, 2 hours ago, this conversation came up in my house. Before you even told me what your scripture was. So for years, I was on staff at the church that we now attend. So I was youth pastor of the church, and then we left, moved to Nashville, and now we're back, and now we're just members of the church. And when I was on staff here, I was at the church 24/7. I did every activity. I was part of everything. I played on the worship team every weekend, and I got burnt out and just a lot. And so one of the things that when we were moving back and we knew we were going to this church because we love the church is that my wife and I had a conversation, and I promised her that I wouldn't become like I was, just so involved, like lots of fruit, but to your point, not much really juicy stuff there, right? And so what I realized is aside from last weekend being at WorkbenchCon, I've been on the worship team every week for like 2 months straight. And I got a call tonight to be on the worship team again this week, which practice was last night, and then help lead worship next week again. And I said something to my wife, and she gave me the look. And Tom, you know the look of, we talked about this. What are you thinking? Kind of look. And I took some time for prayer, and I called back our worship leader, and I just said, hey, look, I'm going to do the next 2 weeks, and then I'm taking a season off, to the same exact reasons what you were just talking about. I've got a young family. I've got a business I just started. we've got a farm. I work a busy job, and I can't continue to spread myself this thin. Not to mention, we do upward basketball this time of the year, so I'm at church all day Sunday, and it was a hard conversation for me to have because I'm the guy that if I can, I'm going to. But for so many years, I didn't have a family. It was just me. And so now that I have a family, I have to prioritize that. And to your point, I was doing all of this stuff, and sure, it's all good, but it doesn't mean that it's done in the right heart or the right vein, because what does it mean to sacrifice your family if you're serving for the church? That's not what it's about. And so, with that being said, you had said something in your Instagram story today that stuck with me. It actually kind of pierced me to the heart in a good way. You'd said, I prune these trees to make sure that the center of the tree can get light, right? You cut all these trees. And the reality is sometimes we have to prune away so that God can get to our heart. Because so often we tend to keep them at arm's length. We tend to have things in the way. We tend to have, whether it's a hobby, whether it's a sin, whether it's, whatever it may be, we tend to put that in front of God and try to hide behind it at times. And that could even be a good thing, like not a good thing, but like you could be volunteering so much that that's your idol, right? And so sometimes you have to prune to let the light in, and that's so good. But as we were going through this, I thought of Matthew chapter 7. So Jesus is talking about bearing fruit, and he basically starts out by saying, watch out for false prophets. They're wolves in sheep clothing, right? And the reality is that a good tree will bear good fruit if, what did it say in John 17, if you abide in him. And a bad tree is going to bear bad fruit, but you will recognize them by their fruit, right? So what fruit is it if Will is volunteering at church so much that he neglects his family? That's not good fruit. I don't care who you are. That's not good fruit. And so to your point, we need to, especially, and I hate to keep banging this drum. We're in an election year. It's 2024. Culture is, I hate to say it, against Christianity. We are the minority. We are seen as being bigots and just not looked upon in a way that's also good. We need to rest in Jesus, because the fruit that we bear from him will give us life. Will give others life. There's so much negativity in the world that if we're abiding in him and doing if our priorities are in line, your outlook on life becomes different, right? This is kind of and we'll talk about this more when we talk about the WorkbenchCon thing, but there's something about being a believer and abiding in God that makes us different. And here's a way in which I didn't realize it until after the fact. So I have my Willie's Wood Honey, launched the business, doing good, love it. God is blessing it. Well, I had somebody reach out to me and they said, hey, does your finish have any chemicals in it? Is it safe to eat? Well, first off, it says right on the bottle, not for consumption. And if you go to the website, it lists everything that's in there. And he went on to explain that he has a 15-year-old daughter who has autism and who is very resourceful, and it's not out of her wheelhouse or out of her nature to do something like grab something she shouldn't and eat it. And he said, I just like to vet everything that comes into my house to make sure that it's not going to be something that harms her. And so the normal person would just say, go to my website, it's there, or just say, no, there's nothing harmful in it, and just give a short answer and just hope that that person becomes a customer. Well, something in me now, one, I do this kind of stuff for living, customer service, all that. I have 2 nephews that are autistic. And so I said to him, I said, hey man, first off, thank you for reaching out and for being above reproach for your daughter. I have 2 nephews that are autistic, and I understand the challenges they could be. So I commend you for taking that step forward and being the father that you are. And I says, no, my finish does not have anything toxic in it. The tongue oil will give you diarrhea if you eat a spoonful of it, but it's not going to kill you. And everything else is all food grade and natural. And I built this conversation with him. And you know what he did? He bought Finish, and now he loves it, and he's going to be a returning customer. I may have not got that sale if I hadn't been the way I was, but the reason that I am the way I am, and the reason that I had that conversation with him, is because of the love of Christ within me and the fruit that I feel that God is using me in. And so your average person may have just been like, hey, dummy, it's on my website, right? Or, hey, the bottle says not for consumption. But that's not what I did. And I believe it's because I have Christ within me, because it's not Will. Because Will's thought, dummy, it's on the website, go look. But that's not what I did. And I think that's a testament to the fruits. Again, not me being arrogant and saying, look what I did, but the reality of like, oh my goodness, my first thought was, dummy, go look at the website. It says it right there, but that's not what happened. And so they will know you by your fruits. And so Christ follower, if you are out there listening, know that you're being watched, that people want to see how you react. And the only thing that you have control of in your life is the reaction that you have, the reaction to your situations. That's the only thing you have control of. And so remember that. Pray that God give you wisdom and clarity to maneuver situations in a way that shows the fruit that you're bearing. So that's my thoughts.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. But yeah, and ironically, that story I posted, I just was in the midst of pruning apricot trees, and so if you ever go to an orchard, you'll see everybody prunes their trees to look kind of like a V, like a hand spread out, the branches going out, and the reason for that is so that way you keep the center open, because if you leave the center all full, all the fruits in there are not going to get any sunlight. And so by opening it up in the center, it lets sunlight come in all in. Just really spoke to me, because that's kind of how our lives are. If we got too much junk cluttering up our time and our calendars, cluttering up our finances, cluttering up our minds with, garbage from TV and social media, the more we clutter it up, the less time and openness we have for the light to come in. And but yeah.
I got a question for you about pruning, because I've never done it. This is our first year owning an orchard. We've got like 8 or 10 trees, right? Are you supposed to prune the branches that stick straight up in the air? And isn't it the ones that are smaller than like your thumb or something like that? I don't understand. Like, I don't want to cut the wrong thing, right?
So I am on my 3rd year of having fruit trees. So I am not really the person to ask for master information. There's tons of good stuff on YouTube. But basically, our trees had not been pruned for 20 years. They were way overgrown. My neighbor when I pruned them the first year, came over and she said, I've lived here for 20 plus years and I've never seen those trees pruned. And I said, well, I hope I don't kill them because, so that they say don't trim more than 1/3 of the tree per year. So if you've got a tree that's way overgrown, you just kind of make some progress this year. And then next year, a little more progress. Third year, a little more progress. And by year 3, you should have it kind of shaped where it is going. So typically, those ones going straight up are what you're wanting to keep. You're pruning those, but you got to look at all. Is it dead wood or is it good fruit wood? But because it will grow toward the sunlight. And so I'll have to take a picture of some of the properly pruned ones at the nice orchards and send to you. And honestly, I watched YouTube videos, read books, and then went and looked at all the fruit trees at the orchards after they pruned them to see kind of how and what. And my neighbor who works for a place that they own a ton of fruit trees, and she's like, the tree will grow back. You're not going to screw it up.
Right. Well, so one of the reasons I ask, we've got a bunch of apple and pear trees in the back, and our side yard, right outside of our bedroom window, there is, I don't remember what it's called, but it's an apple tree, and it is apparently extremely rare. I know that my neighbor, when we bought the house, told us like, hey, that apple tree is really valuable and you want to make sure you take care of it. And when we went and bought the sycamore tree and our crimson maple tree for the front yard, I was telling the guy about about the tree. It's something queen something or other of something. It's some weird fancy name. And he says, you better not cut that tree down. He's like, you don't find apples. You don't find those trees anywhere. He's like, that tree is like old. It's like an old growth apple tree that is extreme. Like people, my wife made applesauce out of the apples. Dude. Oh my goodness. It is so good. Right. And so anyways, the other trees, yeah, it's whatever. But this tree I know is special. I've had like 3 or 4 people tell me that. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to mess this thing up, but it's overgrown. I mean, it made a ton of apples this year, but they were all fairly small, like, maybe the size of like a small apple, or like a mandarin orange kind of thing.
Yep.
And so I'm like, man, we're going to prune all the trees, but I want to prune this one really well so that it's,
Yep.
Make bigger
there
apples.
are some great videos on YouTube on how, from experienced people. And that's what I've watched them each year. And then I go out there and am I doing it perfect? No, but it's better than not doing it at all. And so
Right.
I just encourage you to go online, Google it, and go on YouTube and not just watch one video. When I'm learning something, I like to watch 4 or 5 to see if I'm getting the same information from each person. Because there's some people out there that put out information that they're just wanting to get famous on YouTube and they don't really know what they're doing. But if you watch 4 or 5 of them and 4 of them all say the same thing, then you kind of, okay, I'm getting the right information. And
Right. Yeah. So I'm excited about that. This is going to be our first, having the apple trees and pear trees are our first like farm thing. Like, okay, let's take care of these.
Yep.
We'll probably end up getting some chickens this year, maybe just some of that stuff. But
you do want to prune those trees now.
And yeah, our weather is looking pretty crappy all weekend. And then it's gonna be nice in the week, and then next weekend's supposed to be crappy again. I may take a day off work next week and just say, hey, we're gonna do the apple trees. So we'll see. But man, let's roll into our talk. So what we want to do on this episode is talk about WorkbenchCon. We had built up that we were going to WorkbenchCon. As you listen to this, you're just over a week. We're just over a week outside of WorkbenchCon. and we just want to give you our thoughts and, is it worth it? What are our takeaways and that kind of thing? And Tom and I think have a similar thought process on what we think about WorkbenchCon, but we may have some different things because as time is going on from removed from WorkbenchCon, my thoughts on it are changing a little bit in a good way, I guess. But yeah, Tom, man, WorkbenchCon, what'd you think? I mean, I enjoyed my time, but what are your takeaways? What are your thoughts about WorkbenchCon?
Well, good and bad, and so I really had a good time. I enjoyed it immensely, but there was one reason and one reason only that I enjoyed it, and that was the people. I really enjoyed, met quite a few people of you that listen to the podcast. I also met some others that we had already scheduled, and those people that I actually got to spend time with and talk and get to know a little bit. And I'll just name a few of them. I can't name them all because it's too many people. But Cody at Cadence Manufacturing. So he's the maker of the Jenny Bit, and I do not own any of his products yet. I will. But man, I'm going to tell you, if you own a CNC, what just a fantastic individual. And like I could totally see me and him being friends for the next 30 years. I mean, just a solid dude that loves Jesus and happens to also make a quality CNC bit. I've not used it myself, but everybody that uses it loves it. And I'm going to be ordering some this week. But he just really impressed me, and just down-to-earth human being, and loved it. The owners of Surf Prep, Hannah and Skylar, same thing. I do not own a Surf Prep sander yet. I will. All my sandpaper from now on will come from that company. I just love talking with them. They're solid human beings that happen to also make a quality product. And I just really enjoyed meeting them. Met Andrew with Andrew's Woodworking. That's one of our listeners. He's going to be on the podcast here, and I can't remember the exact date. I think in about a month. And ironically, Andrew is only 18 years old, and he is so mature. He reminds me of my daughter. My daughter's 20, and everybody meets her. Thinks she's 25, 30 years old because she's mature. And same thing with this young man. He went out to eat dinner with us, hung around with us, and I absolutely loved spending time with Andrew. What a fantastic individual. And if you guys remember, we had Leah from Parker Place Woodworks on, got to meet her, and I liked her from the podcast. I liked her from social media. I like her even better now that I met her in person. Just an authentic, real human being that loves Jesus and loves people. And her and Ryan, Ryan is from North Carolina and has Heart and Saw is the name of her business. She's going to be on the podcast later this year. Same thing, just really just kind, loving human beings. And I just enjoyed their spirit and being around them. And, I met Nolan from Nolan Builts that's going to be on the podcast, and Duncan from Dunk Woods, and just amazing guys. And the person that I've been watching his stuff for years was Chris at A Glimpse Inside. I liked his YouTube videos and his content on Instagram, but I like it even more now. Like of the big name stars, I call them big name, in our community. If you go outside woodworking, nobody knows who any of these guys, but in our community, we kind of all look up to these people. He was just so down to earth and humble And Drew Witt that we had on the podcast from Whitworks, he is the exact same individual that you see in his YouTube and on his Instagram, just kind of a happy-go-lucky, goofy guy that loves people. And, man, really enjoyed. And the cool thing about him is, like, we didn't approach him. I didn't walk up to Drew and say, hey, he saw Will and I and came over and talked to us for quite some time. I mean, and so that was what I liked about WorkbenchCon, was the people. I also met Steve at Making It Home that did one of the challenges that we did with the logo swap, and several other people. I can't name them all, but that was what I enjoyed. It was the interaction, the conversations, getting to hear people's stories, and just kind of getting to know people on a more personal level. You know what I mean? I'll give my neutral part, what I kind of liked and what I did not like at the same time, was the classes. And what I mean by that, the classes were good. I took, like, for example, an epoxy class that I took with Jess Crow. Jess Crow was awesome, and her information was great. But the problem with what I found with all of the classes was they're an hour and a half long. And what I mean by that, I think if I could take an all-day class with Jess Crow, I could just learn an enormous amount of information. But every one of the classes starts off with the person teaching it telling you about themselves, and then, in her case, telling you about Total Boat, telling you about the Total Boat products. And then we did this little teeny tiny project. You only got an hour and a half. So you're not going to pour a river table, you know what I mean, or some big project in that small amount of time. So it just felt like it was the information was very rushed in each of the classes. Information was good, but I desired more, if that makes sense, from the teaching perspective. But I really enjoyed that class with Jess Crow and the epoxy. I really enjoyed the cut saw carving class, but it was the same thing in there. First, the speaker told us about herself. Second, the speaker told us about cut saw and all the bits. And it was the same thing with the surf prep sanding class I took. Speaker introduced themselves, speaker told about surf prep in there, and then we did a quick little demonstration. And what I really would have enjoyed, I think, was rather than taking 3 classes each day, I think I would have enjoyed more if I would have been taking 2 and each of the classes were longer. And like I could have really spent some time, because I only got my hand on the surf prep sander for a few minutes. And I would have enjoyed just really diving in and using that thing, or same thing with the cut saw bits or the epoxy. But I think you've got 2 days and they're trying to cram as much into you and they're trying to give you value for the 2 days. But consequently, I think in trying to give you so much, it's kind of like what we talked about with the pruning. I felt like if we, rather than doing 6 classes, if I did a little bit less and it was a bigger fruit, I would have enjoyed it more and got more out of it, if that makes sense. And then from the dislikes, there's only 3 things I didn't like about it. One, and I will stand behind this, is the price. I think that the price is ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd. And that price is going to be different for everybody. The ticket price for the event is the same, but if you live on the West Coast out here, I live on the western side of the Rockies, the flight ticket for me was more than twice what it was for Will, because he's there on the East Coast. So that's a much bigger expense for me. It's also a longer travel day out there and a longer travel day back, which cost more work time loss for me. So that if you lived there in that area and you could just drive in, like we met Tyler, they were just from a couple hours away. They could just drive right up there. They didn't have an airplane expense and all that. So the cost is going to vary from person to person. But for me, I had to pay the plane ticket, which was $346. The second thing was the hotel. The hotel that it's at is nice. Like, it's crazy nice. But I as I was talking to a few people around, here you are in this very fancy hotel and venue space, and everybody there is wearing T-shirts and blue jeans. Because we're all makers. We're guys and gals that like to get in our shop and get dirty, and we would all have been just as happy in a warehouse somewhere or at a camp or somewhere that costs a lot less money. Nobody's wearing a tuxedo, and I felt like we were in a tuxedo venue with T-shirts and blue jeans, if that makes sense. And so I think if they changed the location to something that was less expensive and something more down to earth, I would have actually enjoyed it more than being in this fancy venue. And the third thing that, Will does not drink at all. I do drink, but when I drink, I'm a 1 to 2 drink type of person, maybe 3 if they're weak drinks. I do not like being around drunks, and I'm 53 years old. I'm not into partying. And I did not like the fact that there was, a lot of partying going on. And like one of the events was an open bar event. Well, if you're paying $679 for a ticket and you don't drink alcohol, you essentially just bought drinks for a bunch of people that want to get drunk. And so that is my only negatives. The positives, like I said, the people, the classes, I think the only reason I kind of call them neutral is because I liked them, but I just felt like I was cramming. I really think I would have enjoyed it more as less classes that lasted longer and got more hands-on type stuff. And like I said, I think if they had this at a different venue, even though I do not like the city of Las Vegas, I'm not into gambling, I'm not into all the alcohol and all the other stuff. That Sin City, as they call it, has it. Las Vegas is by far the best city to go to a conference at, because the airport is 10 minutes from all the hotels, and the hotels are cheap because there's so many of them. And it's just an easy place to travel into. Atlanta, the airport was 45 minutes from the venue space. So Will had to pay for an Uber. I didn't, because I drove up from South Carolina. But just a lot of things. But I think the owners of WorkbenchCon are from the Atlanta area. And so I think that event is going to be in Atlanta forever, is what my guess is from what I've understood. But yeah, I'm very thankful that we got to go. I'm more thankful for the relationships and the friends that I made there. And the big thing is we got the tickets for free. But even with the tickets for free, I lost a week of pay because I'm self-employed, and then the cost of the airline tickets and all. It still cost me. It hurt financially to go. Like, I could feel it, and the stress. And praise God to my wife that was so kind to let me take that out of our budget and do it. Will I be going next year? The answer for me is no. And the reason is not because I did not like WorkbenchCon. I would love to go back and hang out with all those people. I would just give anything to do that. But with the cost of a ticket, you would be looking at between airline, hotel, the ticket cost, and losing a week's worth of pay, about $2,500 for me. And for me, I love you, Will, Cody, Andrew, all of you, But if I got to choose between $2,500 to take my wife and daughter on a vacation, or for me to go and hang out with my friends, I hate to say it, I'm going to choose to spend that money on my family. And so that would be and unless my business just skyrockets and I've got so much extra money and time, I don't see it fitting into my family budget, especially not every single year. It might have to be something where maybe once every 3 years type thing I went. But that would be it's really the money issue. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it, Will?
Yeah, we have similar thoughts, but I think mine are a little different. I'm going to go with the negatives first and go backwards. Negative for me, and again, this is subjective, but that it was a party scene. That, every night people drinking. I mean, dude, we got up the lead. I left at but Uber picked us up at 4:30 Sunday morning to go to the airport. There were still people with a case of beer down in the lobby at 4:30 in the morning, and that was every night. And so, that I'm not a fan. Now, it's just a negative because I think it's annoying. And to your point, that open bar. I don't drink, and so those people that drank 5, 6, 7 drinks, and what would have been $150 in drinks, that came out of my pocket in a sense, right? Just because I didn't. So that I was a little bit annoyed, but I knew that was coming and I expected it. And so I can't say it's not a complete turn off for me, but it's definitely a downside. Another downside I'm going to say are the classes. I'm not going to, the reason I say that, to your point about like the time, all the classes I took were great. The people that did them were good, but I feel like for the cost and for what it is, the quality of content or teaching wasn't there. Every class that I took, again, the people that did it were great, but I didn't feel like I learned anything. I honestly didn't. I didn't come out of there. I'll tell you what, out of all the classes I took, the one thing I get left from this was my packaging for my business isn't pretty enough. Like, not pretty enough, but I need to think about the unboxing experience when people open up a jar of Willie's wood finish. And I never thought about that. Right. That's the only thing I got out of the whole thing. And so that part of it, I was kind of disappointed in. I didn't really care for the teaching. They did a newbie mixture thing to where all the first timers went into a room and there was a lot of them. And I think that was a bit unorganized. Not, it was whatever. And the last kind of downside for me is the breakfast. I like to have some hearty breakfast. I want pancakes. I want bacon, sausage, and they gave us yogurt and fruit. Apparently, from what I heard from my buddy Tyson, who I became good friends with at the conferences, that's the first year they've done that. Usually they have bacon, eggs, sausage, the whole kind of thing. The Cracker Barrel breakfast, as I like to call it. And this year was not that. Honestly, I lost weight this week because I didn't eat, even the lunches were okay. I mean, I weren't not anything great. It's kind of fancy for me, I think. So that was kind of a downside. Like the breakfast, I get up, I want to start my day right. And yeah, I could have went to the hotel. They didn't have a continental breakfast. It was continental price, and you had to pay for it. And a lot of people did that. They would go down to the hotel breakfast and do that one because they had the bacon and eggs and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of a downside to me. The neutral for me is the price. And here's why I say that. It's intentional. It's they intentionally price it to be out of reach for the masses. And I know this because I talked to Tyson. He's one of the OGs, started going to WorkbenchCon when it started and been to everyone. They do that intentionally because I hate to say this, to keep the riffraff out. Man, if it was a $250, $300 conference, you better believe there'd be 3 times as many people there, and it'd be a lot harder to manage. So the price is neutral to me. Now, I say that coming from the perspective of my ticket was free, and I had I think it was $115 round trip flight, and I only had to pay for one Uber because the other one, the guy wouldn't let me pay him. And so, and then I split the hotel with Tom. So, I mean, I'm in this well under $1,000, but that's because I live, in a place. Cleveland and Atlanta are Delta hubs, and direct flights are super cheap. And my flight coming home was an hour and 15 minutes. Right. And so my drive from the airport to my house was longer than the flight. So the cost is a neutral to me. So that, I get why it's so expensive. And so the value add for me is yet to come, because I went there promoting the podcast and promoting my business, and I did both, I think, fairly well. And, I've got a list of people I've got to send to you, Tom, because I think we've probably got a dozen or more people that are going to come on the podcast. Right. And so, that part of it, I think. And another part, and this is the things I really liked about the conference, the relationships. I mean, that was the biggest thing for me. Cody, I love Cody Elkins. He is, like you said, such a genuine guy. Spent a lot of time with him. Him and I Ubered back to the airport to head out. We had flights like the same time. Him and I did breakfast that morning together. Spent a lot of time hanging out. And I mean, Friday night, I was talking to him till 1:00 in the morning, just talking about our testimonies about how God's using us and stuff, and how we're blessed. And so, man, it was the relationships, meeting Tyson and Corin and all these guys, right? And then even seeing like you said, the bigger guys. Chris from A Glimpse Inside, the dude is solid. Like, nothing's gone to his head. He's one of the most humble, down to earth guys you've ever met. And so, like, that relationship, those relationships are awesome. And then getting to meet the bigger guys. And so, like, I'll name a few, and I'm not going to name any negative interactions I had, but I'll say John Malecki, dude, he's exactly how he's in his videos.
Yep.
And he was super cool. I mean, there were several times he came up to us. We're standing there talking to Andy Klein about that cool little screw he made. And he came up, and we sat there for 20 minutes just talking and chatting, and there's several times where that happened. And so I was really impressed on that end. And, I got to talk with Cam from Blacktail Studios. Him and I just talked for like 20 minutes. Keith Johnson, Jason from Bourbon Moth. I mean, they're all really good guys and just super down to earth. And they don't see themselves as stars. They're just guys that enjoy doing what they do, and there just happens to be people that follow them. And so I really appreciate that. Now, on that, there were some that were kind of arrogant and stayed away from everybody and wouldn't really talk to people. And you're going to have that. And there's a point that you made, and I think both of us kind of had the realization, is a lot of these guys, these quote unquote bigger guys, grew up together in a sense. They all started where we started, and their channels, their following, their everything, they grew together. And so, a lot of these guys, this is the one time of year where they get to come and see their buddies. And so we can't go to WorkbenchCon and, like you said, expect for them to be buddy with us, because they've got their buddies, and that's something we have to realize. Now, with that being said, Cody Elkins, him and I are going to be close for a long time. I mean, I see him being, awesome guy. Tyson, awesome guy. Corin, I mean, that group that we had dinner with, right? That was just a solid group of guys. And so I love that side of it. Like you said, meeting some of the people that have been on the podcast, Leah. Yeah. So I have so much more respect for people that are who they are outside of, their normal circumstances. So like you said, Drew is Drew, and what you get is what you get. And I love that about him. Right. Leah, the same way. Got to meet some ones that are going to be on the podcast. Andrew, Nolan, Dunk. Awesome, genuine guys. By far, to your point, from this point on, I will not buy anything but Surf Prep sandpaper. Do I want a Surf Prep sander? I do. Is that in budget? It is not. That comes down to, do you want to go to WorkbenchCon or do you want a Surf Prep sander? And I have a nice sander, and so that's kind of my thought there. But you didn't really mention it, but the owners of Surf Prep are Christians, and they're going to be on the podcast at some point. Awesome, genuine people that are just down to earth, and they run a business by the model of servant leadership. And if that doesn't tell you something, when they told a story, I'll tell this real quick, where they went through to get the core values of their business. And instead of the owners coming up with the core values, they let the people that work there come up with the core values. And they says, what are the core values in your family? And that's what they made their business around. And so, man, I love them. I can't wait to try out. I got some of the sandpaper. They're coming out. Let's just say they're coming out with something really exciting. I'm excited for, because it's going to be able to replace the sandpaper that I love. And so that's when I'll really jump in head first. I got to meet Nick from Nick's Custom Woodworks. He also owns Boss Dog Glue. And so I just ordered some glue from him. I'm gonna give it a try and see how I like it. So that side of it I really liked. The hotel and the location. Again, I think it's partially intentional. What I was told is that the first year it was in a warehouse, kind of in a sketchier part of town, and people's cars got broken into. And so they brought it out to where it's at. And you have to think, again, it's intentional. They want to be somewhat out of reach for the normal population. I get that. But it was kind of cool. Like, the Battery was across the way, a 10-minute walk, and you're at all these different restaurants and the hotel. Honestly, our room was nice, but it wasn't as nice as the price. I've stayed in nicer hotels that cost less. Yep. Just from an appearance, like that hotel was still stuck in the early 2000s, and again, it worked fine. I wouldn't do it if I didn't have somebody to split it with. Right. And so the question comes down to, is Will going to go back? That's to be determined. I can budget and work it into my budget. I don't know yet if it's worth it. Because once you start factoring in, if you have to pay for a ticket and everything, how expensive it gets. And if Willie's Wood Finishes takes off and it's a point where I want to go and promote it, then yeah, I'll probably go back. Right now, as we speak, am I going to go back? Probably not. But that's probably going to, that may change, right? I'm not going to definitely say I'm not going back, but I put a lot of value on relationship. And so, I got to evangelize and kind of talk about Jesus to some people, and I'm keeping up with them on Instagram, and I got to build a relationship with Cody and so if it comes down to it, I'll just not drink coffee for the rest of the year, and I'll go to Workbench. You know what I mean? Like in my mind. And so I'm not sure. I'm considering it. And so do I think it's for everybody? And so here's where I kind of want to end and land the plane on this, and you can give your thoughts on this. Who is WorkbenchCon for? If you are an inspiring content creator that wants to eat with the guys that have done it and have succeeded in it, and you have the budget and you can afford to go, this is for you. You're going to be able to, I stood in a circle at one point. And within that circle, there was like 8 of us. There was like 15 million subscribers, YouTube, right? If you just add them all up. And just standing there, being a fly on the wall and hearing them talk about, talk shop in a sense, like I could see how valuable that could be if I was trying to do what they did. I don't want to be a big content creator, but I could see the value in that. And that happened all the time. Again, there were some content creators that were they did their own thing and they didn't really, hang out with the populace. But man, there were several times I stood in a circle with a bunch of guys that, the guy next to me had 1.5 million subscribers on YouTube, super guy, just stood there and talked shop. And so that I could see a value add for. Yeah. So I think it's for if you are, even if you're an inspiring small business owner in the maker space, this could be a value add for you. Again, budget $2,000, $2,500. And if you can afford that without going in debt and putting on a credit card, and you can go to this trip and you can not worry about not paying the electric bill or something crazy because you went to WorkbenchCon, then yeah, go. But your expectations have to be, don't go planning on hanging out and partying with, Cam from Blacktail and Jason Hibbs. They have their crew and their people. Now, there's one more thing I wanted to add I forgot about. One of the things I was disappointed about, in a sense, and Surf Prep didn't do this, but a lot of the other vendors were there intentionally to rub elbows with the big content creators. And so there's a time Tom and I went to get pizza, and we walk into this pizza place, and the one side is completely shut down, and it was one of the vendors got that whole side. And if you looked at the table, you name the woodworking content creator on YouTube, they were there, right? And I get it, but it put it out of touch for the rest of us, to where I would have loved to just go there and see some of those guys eating pizza and grab a pizza and maybe sit not at their table, maybe close to them, or maybe be able to interact with them, but they had it closed off. And we saw that there. We saw that at Murph's in the hotel. The same thing was happening there. And so that kind of stuff kind of threw me off a little bit. I get it. But yeah, that was kind of thrown off. But anyways, that's my thoughts on WorkbenchCon. I enjoyed my time. I liked it. Drink lots of water, because I didn't lose my voice, because I drank I had to pee every 10 minutes. That's all I'm saying. So any last thoughts on that, Tom?
Yeah. And yeah, I want to make sure you understand that I'm not saying I'm not going back because I didn't have fun. I loved it. I loved the people and the interaction. But for me, it's from a financial standpoint. If I were 25 and single and didn't have a wife and kid and a farm to take care of and a business run, I'd be going back next year. That would be kind of like, I would just say, okay, this is my vacation. I'm going to go back and hang out with the people I like, because I like the people that much. Same thing on the classes. The one thing I will say about the classes, I gained one piece of information that I could not have gained from watching on YouTube, and my perspective on community is, if I know something, all you have to do is ask me, and I'm gonna share it. That's what a community is about. We shouldn't have to pay one another to share. All these speakers are just people off of YouTube, and so. And honestly, for the most part, sharing common sense stuff. The only thing I learned that really was opened my eyes. So in the very final class, I took a class about building relationships with brands. And the young lady that taught it represents Jason Hibbs, Bourbon Moth Woodworking. She's from, I guess, England or somewhere. She had a British accent. And so it's kind of difficult understanding everything she said. She talked 100 mile an hour with an accent. But she said one thing, and I have been breaking the rule, and I guarantee you every one of you on social media have been breaking the rule as well. And that is this. So everybody knows I like Harvey. I love my Harvey table saw. So if I give you the 5 brands that I would like to work with, one would be Harvey, because I don't want to work with a brand I don't use their tools. I want to work with brands that I like their product and that they have good customer service and good values. So now that I've touched a Surf Prep sander and I love their product and I love those people, that would be another brand I would like to work with. Rockler is one that I would like to work with eventually, because I think they make good stuff at a good value, versus Woodpeckers makes good stuff at a WorkbenchCon price, very expensive price. And not to say if Woodpecker's coming, because I have Woodpecker stuff and it's great. I just think it's ridiculously overpriced. Bessie clamps. I love Bessie clamps. Would love to work with them. And so all these brands that I like, Festool, I have been basically advertising for them for free. And my whole thought process up until this point is, when I make a video using my table saw, I want to recognize Harvey, because my thought process is that if I'll basically promote them now, when I get enough followers, hopefully they'll want to work with me. And what this lady says, she said, if you advertise them for free now, why would they want to pay you once you have enough followers? And I never thought about it that way. So from now on, I will not be promoting any products in my videos whatsoever. I'll be using them, but I'm not going to tag. I'm not going to do anything to promote a single product in hopes that one day I'll have enough followers. And I thought, I was like, I never thought about it that way. So that's the most valuable piece of information I got out of any of the classes. But yeah, it like I said, for who I think it's for, I do think if I were Cody and marketing my bits, or you and marketing Wood Honey, or if I had a product that selling it to those people or giving it to them for them to then market to all their audience, I think there's more value in the price of going to WorkbenchCon. But for a guy like me that has a wife, has a daughter in college, has a farm, has a business, man, it's just a large financial pill to swallow. And I could see myself going, like I said, probably like maybe every third year or something. But I don't think my wife is going to let me look at me with any type of love and respect and say, yeah, you can go spend $2,500 every year on a vacation that's just for you. And I think it'd be kind of selfish on my part to do that. But yeah, so. But.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The only kickback would be, like you said, the business aspect is the business development side of things. My business pays for me to take, $2,500, $3,000 classes all the time. And so as a small business owner, there's gotta be, you have to develop yourself some. And so, but to your point, like I've got a young family, and that was a really hard weekend. My son had the stomach bug, man, and he was down and thrown up all over the house, literally. And my wife called me basically in tears because of like, this is a hard weekend. And so that part of it I resonate with. One of the things that was interesting that I would consider, Tyson, who we went to dinner with, he brought his wife. Now they only live 2 hours away. They left the kids at the grandparents for the weekend. But I would take my wife, like, she wanted to come hang out, and then at night we could go do dinner and stuff. And although my wife isn't one to go shopping or do anything outside of, but like if she ever wanted to, like, yeah, come on down. But to your point, there is one thing too, I think you're right on. They live in Nashville or at Atlanta, and so that's why they do it there. But I think somewhere more accessible, even Nashville or Las Vegas. Nashville would still be expensive, but like it's a lot easier to get around. The airport's not nearly as busy. And so I could see a value add if it were somewhere else outside of Atlanta, because it is central and it's kind of right. I mean, really, it's more eastern than it is, there. Even like Dallas, Fort Worth,
like Dallas would be centrally located. That would probably be if you're trying to balance the East Coast to West Coast. I've never gone to a conference in Dallas, so I don't know how that city lays out in reference. I know they have big venue spaces but where if they're located near the airport or whatever. But
really, if you want to go central, St. Louis, probably. St. Louis or Omaha, maybe. Omaha, Nebraska, somewhere like that area.
Like Omaha would probably be much more cost effective. But the problem is, then your airline ticket's going to be more. Dallas, everybody flies into Dallas,
right?
So, that would probably be.
Anyways, the whole I enjoyed WorkbenchCon. It's more of a 75-25 if I'm going to go back. 25 being not. Or 75 being not going to go back, but 25%, maybe. It was good. I was exhausted. It was a long weekend because you're on your feet all the time and you're just going. And then some crazy people get up at 4 a.m. and
but the funny thing is the very first day we got there on Thursday night, I got up 4:00 the next morning, and that night, Thursday night, there was not a bunch of partiers late into the evening. When I went out in the lobby, I had the whole lobby to myself. It was peaceful and quiet. And, but on Saturday morning and Sunday morning, there were still people out there drinking in the lobby when I came out at 4 a.m. to read my Bible. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. I was like, but it was good though. But I will say that I don't want people to think I'm saying I'm not going back. I'm just looking at it from the financial standpoint. But I will say this. So say you're wanting to build the relationships and you're wanting that experience, and because I do think the people is what makes it. But I will say this, the Maker Collab Challenge that we did, and also the Makers Challenge Central challenges that I've done, those both are free. And if you'll join those challenges, you don't have to be the most artistic. We won the tickets off of the logo swap, but the other challenges that I've done with Maker Collab, I've not won anything, and same thing with Makers Challenge. But I have met people that I've become good friends with. And so if you don't have the budget to go to something like WorkbenchCon and you're just wanting to get to know other people, I encourage you, even if you think your woodworking isn't that good or you don't have the artistic ability to compete, who cares about whether you win a prize or not? Hop in them, but then follow the people that are in the challenges. Encourage them in their builds and kind of get to know them. That's how I got to be friends with Steve at Making It Home. He was in that challenge with us. I started following him and all the other people that are doing it. And me and him just got to where we communicate regularly. And so, there are other ways to build relationships if you don't have the budget for something like this. So, but, man.
So I will end with one thing real quick, because I don't know if I told you this. I was in the main hall where they had the dining stage area, and I was walking around looking at the vendors. And I don't remember your name, and I'm so sorry. One of our listeners saw my hat and came up to me and was like, "Are you Will from Fly Woodworks? You have Faith Talks Wood podcast?" And I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Dude, I love your podcast." Dude, I'm so blown away. I was so like, I was almost like, I was starstruck that he was like starstruck, not starstruck, but like that he recognized me. I don't remember his name. There were so many people that day. I think it was Friday. I was just like so many people, but so I don't remember your name. Thank you for approaching me and telling me to listen to the podcast. And actually, there's another guy on. I spent several different times just hanging out and talking with him, and he messaged me on Instagram yesterday and was like, "Wait a second, you're Will from Faith Talks Wood podcast?" He's like, "I listen to you and Tom every week." I had no idea that him and I like were hanging out at WorkbenchCon. He did not register the two. So I just really appreciate everybody reaching out. And I had a lot of people, and Tom did too, ask me like, "Hey, what'd you think?" And so I had several messages and stuff to people on Instagram that I was just telling them my thoughts of WorkbenchCon, and very similar to what we just did now, but just through text. So, but yeah, man, it's getting late. Until next week, I'm Will from Fly Woodworks.
I'm Tom from Mountain Valley Maker.